In just 12 days, the Middle East stood at the edge of catastrophe. Cities shook under the sound of rockets. The world held its breath. And in the shadows, one superpower worked desperately to keep the region from sliding into a full-scale, modern apocalypse. This is the story of the 12-Day War, a clash between Iran and Israel that almost spiraled into disaster for the entire world. A war defined by fear, pride, and survival. A war that was short, but terrifyingly close to being final. To understand why this war broke out, we need to go back decades. Before 1979, Iran and Israel weren't enemies. In fact, they were allies. Israel supplied Iran with weapons. Iran provided Israel with oil. But all of that changed with the Iranian Revolution. When Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, Iran redefined itself as a sworn enemy of Israel, calling it the Little Satan. Ever since, Tehran has supported militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, groups committed to Israel's destruction. Israel, in turn, launched strikes against Iranian assets in Syria, assassinated nuclear scientists, and worked tirelessly to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear bomb. For decades, the two countries fought a shadow war, never directly, but always through proxies, sabotage, and covert attacks. But in this story, that shadow war finally broke into the open. The trigger came fast and unexpectedly. Israel launched an airstrike against a suspected Iranian weapons convoy in Syria. Dozens were killed, including several high-ranking Iranian officers. This time, Iran didn't hold back. Within hours, missiles were launched directly from Iranian soil, targeting Tel Aviv and Haifa. For the first time in history, Iran had attacked Israel openly and directly. Israel's response was immediate and brutal. Fighter jets thundered across the skies, striking Iranian military bases, missile silos, and even infrastructure deep inside Iran. The world watched in disbelief. A red line had been crossed. The shadow war had turned into open war. Fire and fear. Missiles rained down. Israeli citizens crowded into bomb shelters. Air raid sirens screamed across Tel Aviv. At the same time, Iranian cities like Isfahan and Shiraz were rocked by Israeli airstrikes. The death toll climbed rapidly on both sides. Cyber attacks crippled power grids, causing blackouts that plunged millions into darkness. By day 4, Hezbollah had entered the fight. Thousands of rockets were fired from Lebanon, overwhelming Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Israel faced the nightmare of a two-front war, rockets from the north, missiles from the east. Memories of 1967 and 1973 came rushing back. For Israel, survival itself was at stake. Iranian state media declared that Jerusalem will burn. But the cost was steep. Israeli drones struck oil refineries, sending fireballs into the skies of southern Iran. By now, the world economy began to panic. Oil markets collapsed as tankers were hit in the Persian Gulf. Shipping routes were disrupted. Gas prices spiked globally. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other Gulf states scrambled their defenses. Egypt quietly placed its military on alert. Everyone feared the conflict would spill across borders. Civilians bore the brunt. In Tehran, families fled into underground parking lots to escape bombing raids. In Tel Aviv, schools and hospitals were converted into shelters. Thousands of lives had already been lost. As the conflict threatened to spiral beyond control, the United States stepped in. U.S. aircraft carriers steamed into the Mediterranean. American destroyers intercepted Iranian missiles. Behind closed doors, Washington pushed both sides toward an uneasy ceasefire. But diplomacy alone wasn't enough. To carry messages between Tehran and Tel Aviv, the U.S. relied on unexpected channels, including Pakistan, which quietly became a bridge between bitter rivals. And then both Iran and Israel exhausted finally. Numbers can't capture the suffering. In Israel, over 1,000 civilians were killed, with entire neighborhoods in Tel Aviv reduced to rubble. Families who had lived through decades of tension now faced their worst nightmare. In Iran, the devastation was far greater. Airstrikes leveled bases, airports, and infrastructure. Thousands were dead, tens of thousands injured. Economically, the nation lost billions in just days. Hospitals overflowed. Morgues filled. Refugees fled border areas, carrying only what they could hold. The war lasted less than 2 weeks. but left scars that will take generations to heal. For Israel, this war was more than bombs and missiles. It was an existential fear. The country is small, surrounded by enemies. A few well-aimed missiles could cripple its entire economy, or worse, force millions into shelters for weeks. The fear wasn't just physical. It was psychological, the fear that, this time, survival might not be guaranteed. Every strike from Hezbollah, every missile from Iran, echoed the memories of wars past. Israel had faced enemies before, but this was different. This was Iran, a nation of 80 million, with vast territory, resources, and regional influence. If Israel's fear was survival, America's fear was chaos. Washington knew the stakes. A full-blown Iran-Israel war could ignite the entire Middle East, destroy oil markets, and drag in Russia and China. So the U.S. acted fast. Carriers were deployed. Missile defense systems shielded Israeli skies. Diplomats worked around the clock, calling leaders in Riyadh, Doha, Ankara, and Cairo. Behind the scenes, U.S. intelligence also reached out to Pakistan, a Muslim-majority country with channels to both Tehran and Washington. Islamabad became a surprising but crucial player, carrying messages that others could not. Without American involvement, the war would not have stopped. With it, the conflict was frozen, not resolved, but contained. Pakistan's role was quiet, but vital. As a nuclear power with ties to both the West and the Muslim world, it became a bridge when direct talks were impossible. Pakistani envoys helped pass messages between Iran, Israel, via the U.S., and Gulf countries. This role gave Pakistan rare diplomatic weight, a reminder that sometimes peace is built not by the strongest, but by those trusted to speak to both sides. Under immense pressure, both Iran and Israel agreed to a ceasefire. The terms were vague, deliberately so. Neither side wanted to admit defeat. Israel declared it had defended itself. Iran claimed it had shown its strength. But behind the speeches, both nations knew the truth. They had fought to exhaustion. The war had no winner, only survivors. When the guns fell silent, the devastation was clear. Tens of thousands dead, cities scarred, economy shattered, a region traumatized once again. For the United States, the war was proof of its continued power, but also of its burden. Without America, the war might have consumed the Middle East. With America, it was stopped, but only barely. And for Iran and Israel, the war left nothing solved. The hostility remained. The distrust deepened. The scars grew darker. The 12-day war lasted less than 2 weeks. But in those 12 days, the world came closer to catastrophe than it dared to admit. Israel fought for survival. Iran fought for pride. America fought to stop the fire from spreading. And in the end, the war ended, not with victory, but with exhaustion. The lesson is haunting. Wars today don't need to last years to be devastating. In the modern Middle East, 12 days was enough to scar generations. The war is over, but the shadow it cast remains.